Speaking of sentimental stuff, you've made me wait 3 months
right.
to tell me what it is behind this knife. And I asked you about it a little while ago, and you're like, "We're still podcasting, right?"
Right.
Yes.
That was the only way I knew I was going to get to redo the podcast.
Yeah. You had to hold it over my head.
I'm not telling you that story unless we're re-recording.
So for everyone watching, this is what we're talking about. This was a Christmas gift from Mr. Tounsley this year. And on the knife, well, actually, I'll let you go for it. And I saw that yours says the same thing the other day, too.
Yeah, it does. So at one point, you had given me a thank you card or something for a T-shirt with a card on it when you were talking about rebranding Storyline and stuff. And in that, you said, thank me for my mentorship. And you've mentioned me or referred to me as a mentor several times, which is that's really cool. I don't take that lightly. So I wanted to get you something for Christmas. Kelly's like, Drew's getting you something for Christmas. I had already bought this and I didn't know what I wanted to get this for you and do this, but it seems like such a, I don't know, I've never bought a gift for a dude before.
Funny.
Yeah. So I'm like, it was just such a weird deal. Yeah. So I had bought this and it was sitting in my dresser, and she's like, Drew got you a Christmas gift, just so you know. I'm like, oh yeah, I got him a better Christmas gift.
You weren't wrong. Yeah, you weren't wrong.
Right? No, it's not better. It's the thought that counts. So growing up, I always had a weird appreciation for pocket knives. I would go into a hardware store and, the old, case knife case and there'd be all these knives in there, and I'd go and I'd stare at them and I'd be like, oh, that one would be really good for cutting rope. And, oh, that one would be really good for, skinning a deer. I really appreciated pocket knives and knives in general, I guess. And especially if they had a very specific use, they were a tool built for something. And I just always, I didn't have to own them. I didn't buy them. I went in there and I just had a lot of appreciation for them. And I just thought I was a weird little kid. But about, 2-3 years ago, I read an excerpt from an article that was first printed in a magazine called The Appalachian, and it talks about the kind of man that carries a pocket knife. And I'm paraphrasing here. Excuse me. I don't know a word for word, but basically it says, a man that carries a pocket knife is the kind of guy that can fix things. Mm. He's prepared. He has tools and he knows how to use them. He's the guy you look to when there's trouble and you need help. That's the guy that carries a pocket knife. And it literally dawned on me at that time that the reason I had this appreciation for pocket knives, or knives, I guess, was all the men that I looked up to in my life all carried a pocket knife.
Interesting.
My dad, my uncles, the guys that my dad hunted and fished with, they all carried pocket knives. And literally I had this epiphany in that moment, oh, that's why, the two equate for me, and that's why I appreciate them so much. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I was when you're talking about me being a mentor to you, I'm like, well, what a cool gift. Just I don't know. There's stuff there, but
yeah.
This is, this is what you should look to be, I guess. And then the second part is the engraving on it.
Yeah.
So it says,
this one?
I know this one. So I don't know my name. That's my favorite quote ever. So I'm a quote guy too. You're a quote guy. I'm a quote guy. I got a million quotes, and most of the quotes that I know remind me of lessons I've learned. A quote is just a reminder of a lesson I learned. You learn a lesson, somebody tells you that quote, and you're like, oh yeah, no, that is a real thing. And then that helps you remember that lesson. But this particular quote is a filter that I run things through. It's literally a filter that I run things through that help me decide how to live my life. And so the quote is, all that is necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing. And it was originally said by a guy named Edmund Burke, and you can go on the internet and look it up, and there's a whole bunch of arguing about whether he ever actually said it or not. But basically, he said several versions of this quote in different speeches, and it's pretty much been boiled down to this. But it's use that as a filter a lot. So like, and I think it goes well with the knife thing, because like all the good men that I knew that carried knives, that's why I had that appreciation for the knives. And this is like a filter that I run things through to make sure that I'm living as a good man. So a really good example of this, there's a kid at the gym that's been coming for a while, and he doesn't have a lot going on. He's not troubled, but he doesn't have a lot of good male role models. He doesn't have a lot of direction. He's just going out on his own. He's a young man that's just going out on his own, moving away from his family and stuff. Doesn't have a lot of direction. He's got some anger. He's got like, this kid could end up in a bad place. Like, but so the other day, our other friend Drew calls me up. He's like, or he texts me. He says, "What are you doing today?" So I got a million things to do. I thought he wanted to go train or go get lunch or something. Like, I got a million things going on today. What's good? What's up? He's like, "So I want to talk to you about this kid." He's like, I want to help him out, and this is what I want to do. I'm doing it regardless, but I'd appreciate it if you could help me help him. And I'm literally like, I'm not helping fighters anymore. I'll support the gym till the end of the day. I'll sponsor the gym, and Will can use that to help the fighters in whatever way he wants, but I'm not sponsoring individual fighters anymore. It never turns, like, I never walk away from that feeling good.
It's on the record now. Folks.
It is. I'm not, yeah, so don't ask me anymore. Go talk to Will. And I'm like, I'm not doing it anymore. He's like, well, here's the deal. He's like, this is a kid. This is why I feel this way. This is why I think we should help. And I'm like, I run that through this filter. Like, all that's necessary for the triumph of evil, all that's necessary for this kid to end up being a piece of shit, is for me to not do anything. Like, for a good man, which I want to be, to not do anything. Okay, I can help. I should probably help.
Wow. Yeah, that's heavy, man. It's when you talk about men that you respect carrying a knife, the first one that comes to mind, and the only one that made an impact on me was my grandpa growing up.
Yeah.
And God, he's the coolest motherfucker that ever lived, man.
Yeah, partially because he carried a knife.
So. Partially because he carried a knife. But he's a farm boy from Kansas, had over a dozen siblings. I think he was one of 13. Wow. And the whole, like, the typical story, right? Everybody's helping out on the farm. The whole thing. And till the day he died, he's wearing pearl snap shirts. He's got a Stetson, big old handlebar mustache. Drove classic cars, fixed them up himself. Just like, objectively one of the coolest dudes I've ever met. And one of my favorite memories of him, and it happened all the time, was he would bring his knife out and he would sit. He'd sit on the corner of the table, and he had this way of peeling apples where you could damn near see through them.
Sure.
And he would sit there, and it reminds me of what you talk about with cigars, where he'd sit on the edge and he'd have something to keep his hands occupied, and he'd sit there and just talk to us. Yeah. And he'd like just these razor thin apple slices, and he'd hand us one while we were talking. We didn't even think of it, but it was just like, it was like watching a master at work, and it was just the most simple thing of all time. Right. But he was the only one that I remember like ever carrying a knife and having a real like reason for it, I guess. Yep. And every time he got an apple in his knife, I was like, "Ooh, I'm going to be able to hang out with Grandpa, and I'm going to be able to somehow he's going to get 500 apple slices out of this thing. Right. We're going to be here for a while." Right. But one of the coolest things about this was the quote on here I think is awesome, and it was I've been trying to do a lot of thinking of like, why won't Jason tell me what this means? What does it mean to him? So it's really cool to be able, and I'm glad that you saved it until now to put all those pieces together. But it was really cool for me. My grandpa's a mentor that was there, but I never utilized. Sure. And my little brother did, and I'm so proud of him for that. And my first tattoo was my grandpa's birthday on my Achilles, is like, cool. Kind of that's my Achilles heel that, I would have been a better man if I would have spent more time around him and done a lot of those things. And it's always a good reminder that like not to take advantage or like to take for granted the people who are in your life. Like all that, I was a stupid kid, you know, and it was like, you know, I wanted to go out shooting with my friends, or I wanted to go ride bikes with my buddies, and all of these different things that I would give up in a freaking heartbeat to like go and have another apple with my grandpa. And after you gave me this knife, it was like one of the first things that I did was able to like sit down, cut up an apple, and just like think about my grandpa, because this is also the first knife that I ever started carrying and putting together this fucking studio. It's been super helpful because the amount of zip tie, this will cut through a zip tie. It'll cut through this weird little thing that was on the box today. But I really appreciate it, man. And it's, even if there was no cool quote on it or anything like that, it's, I feel grateful to have you as a mentor and a friend and all the things. And it'll also give me, an excuse when I'm like, I don't really have room in my pockets today. I'm like, nah, I'm carrying it. I want to be one of those guys Jason's talking about.
Do it for your grandpa.
Yeah, absolutely, man.